So hello everybody, ConvertWithMoss in version 18 is out and it brings a long list of new features as well as some fixes, and the main bullet points are support for the Elektron Tonverk as well as Spectrasonics Omnisphere 3, and last but not least a ton of Roland formats. But let me walk you through all these things. As you see, the list of input formats is now even longer and we're getting a problem to see them all. You can still click here to get all of them in a menu, but I think I need to think about how to redesign that to find the formats a bit easier. I did some renamings in there. For example, contact and machine are now also prefixed with native instruments, native instrument and I, so they are also together now, as well as I integrated the Akai MPC project track and Akai MPC key group detectors into one, which I just called Akai MPC Modern, and that supports now also the XPM format, which is in the new JSON format. So this can now be read as well. But looking at the new Elektron Tonverk, which is actually the first sampler which supports multi-samples. I was really surprised about that. But checking out the format, it's very, very basic and limited. It only supports a very basic multi-sample layout, so there are no synthesizer parameters like envelopes or filter settings supported in that format. And even more, even that basic layout has some quirks. For example, there are no real key ranges across the keyboard. So what it does, it always plays the sample with the closest root node. So I don't know how you can come up with such an idea. The issue with that is, if, for example, if you do drum samples and want to have one tom sample which fits a certain range, and you have another drum sample close by, it might pick the wrong one, so not the sample you actually expected it to pick. So yeah, but nevertheless, this is working in both directions, so you can pick on both sides. You can pick Elektron Multi as a source as well as Elektron Multi as a destination format, and it's a good idea to resample them to 24-bit 48 kilohertz because this is the native format of the device. I don't have a Tonverk, so there might be issues, but I can at least read a file and output the same file, so I'm pretty confident that it works. But let's have a look. What is the output? So let's go with my normal test files. So let's pick some pads here from my old sample library and let's convert them to Tonverk, and here we go. And I think that's enough to have a look. So it creates this eMulti file, and let's check out the output. And you see it's creating subfolders for each multi-sample it converted, and this creates a folder which contains the eMulti as well all the WAV files. So it uses WAV files, which is nice to see. And this eMulti file is pretty straightforward. So it's luckily a plain text file, so pretty easy to read what's in there. And if you want to tweak stuff, you can also do that in that file. So yeah, please write me down in a comment if that works for you, and I hope it does. But as I said, I don't have a testing device. But on to the next one. Spectrasonics Omnisphere 3 is a very popular software synthesizer, and Keith Crossley made a video about the format that is used for user samples. Many thanks for that. I also will link his video down in the descriptions if you're curious. And he described a bit how this format works, and we will look at that as well in a second. But what Omnisphere does, it allows you to import a single sample only, but he found out that it's also possible to create out of that format proper multi-samples. The factory format is a bit different, so this is not supported, and it's also not my intention to getting the factory sounds out of that. So, but nevertheless, you can create user multi-samples for Omnisphere and also can can read them again, this format for the user samples. It's a bit tricky since you need to put files into two different folders, but first let's simply create some files. So back to ConvertWithMoss, and here is now as a destination you can choose Omnisphere 3. It's as well here in the source file, so you can also read that format. So let's do the same, convert some pad sounds, here we go, and let that have some fun. Yeah, we don't need all of them, so let's cancel that as well. Okay, so here we go, and let's check again the output folder. So these created lots of folders, one for each multi-sample, and this created now such dB files, so one dB file for each of the samples, and there's also a setmap file and an preset Omni file. So the dB files contain the samples, the setmap describes the basic layout, and the preset file has additional preset data like envelopes, filter settings, and these things. The dB file is a very weird format which just concatenates different other files, so it's worth really having a look at that because it's pretty funny. It has a kind of XML section which describes the directory, then you have all the sample data in it, and that's basically it. And there's also some more XML description and the end, and that's also basically identical for other file formats. So for example, the preset Omni file works similar. It's also a kind of XML structure. What really drove me crazy is that it actually wasn't working, and what I found out in the end after wasting some days looking into that, that's actually not proper XML. For example, there are additional spaces and weird stuff in there, and if you don't replicate this format exactly, it will just not work. And then finally wrote my own kind of parser and writer for this very weird format, and now it's working as well. So what do you need to do with all these files? The thing is, you need to put them in two different locations. So what you first need to do is to locate the Steam folder, which is the folder that Spectrasonics called it that way, and on Windows it's in program data Spectrasonics Steam, and there you find the Omnisphere folder. I'm not sure, I haven't checked on Mac, but I think it's pretty easy to find since Steam contains also the main library of Omnisphere, so it should be easy to spot. But where are the user files now located? So you need to look for two folders. The first one is in sound sources and then user. This is the folder that contains all your samples as well as a setmap file. So what you need to do is simply copy everything from here except the log file, we don't need the log file, into that folder. But now the preset files, they need to be in a different folder. They need to go into, let's just copy that here. They need to go into the settings library and then patches and then user. So we can simply search for them. So let's look for preset Omni. Let's go up one, search for these files, and you will get all of them after a while. So, and let's simply copy all of them into that folder. But a bit of problem that is that they will also show up then on a first level. And if you don't want to have that or want to have subfolders, you can also create folders in here. So for example, let's call that, why not Moss pads, and then let's put everything in there except this index file here. And then it might be a bit cleaner to find these things in Omnisphere. So let's head over to Omnisphere now. After we did that, I loaded up Omnisphere in Bitwig, and you see there is currently no user here because we don't had one before. So what you need to do is to open up here the whole patch selection, and you can do here a rescan. Let's have a look at that. And there was something new, so here it was, Moss Patches, here it is. So Moss Pads, it's showing up here. And you will also see the files we created and copied over there. And let's load up someone, and here we will get an error because weirdly we also need to scan the samples folder as well. So to get in there, it's a little bit more tricky. You need to have sample oscillator here selected, so you can click on that one, and then you will get into the sample selection area, and here you can also do a rescan. So always think about that, to have scanned both the folders with the samples as well as the folder with the patches. And okay, it's also flat here, so we could also create a folder here, but nevertheless, it's okay now. So, but back now to this patch selection. So now we should also be able here to select only our user files, and then this is so weird. Moss pads. Here we are, Moss pads. So we get now all the converted pads. Let's check out one. And it even creates a sound. Another one. So works totally nicely. And what is really the nice thing about Omnisphere is that it has really a nice synth engine, so it's now pretty easy to tweak that into something totally different. Yeah, you get the idea. So you can now easily get multi-sampled source material into Omnisphere. Yay! Yeah, but on to the gazillion of Roland sampler formats. So there are basically two main big ones. The first one is those of the S-50 series, so the S-50, S-330, S-550 and the W-30. They shared basically the same format, except that the one for the S-50 is a little bit different than the others. It was a 12-bit sampler, and it only supported 15 or 30 kilohertz sampling rate, which is also interesting. And that's worth mentioning because I noticed lots of players of destination formats have issues with that resolution. So it's a good idea to resample that. But let me show you that. So back to ConvertWithMoss, I put here a couple of example files. So here is a folder with one disk cat, so a disk stored as a file, and we can pick that folder. Then you can say Roland S5XX, and we create S of Z because it's nicely to read, and let's go with that. And as you see, it contained piano sound in there. Let's check the output folder. Oh, I should have deleted all that stuff, but whatever, there are the two ePiano files. And let's load up one straight in Bitwig here. So, nice one. Sounds lovely. Yeah, works totally nice. So these are still 15 kilohertz. What you can do now, that's also a new feature in ConvertWithMoss 18. So you remember the processing dialog, which allows you to, for example, do normalization, make things mono and all that stuff. It has now a new option to always resample, because when that is off and you select here, for example, you want to have reduce the bit depth to 16-bit and reduce the sample frequency to 44.1 kilohertz, it does only down samples. So only 32 or 24-bit samples are reduced, and not if it's a 12-bit sample. And this gives you now the option to put everything that goes via the processing in the conversion to that fixed 16-bit and 44.1 format. So we can try that as well, but you need to enable that on top. So then you enable all that processing. For example, we could also do normalization. So let's give that a go, but maybe before that, let's clear that whole folder so we can easily see what's going on. Let's convert that again. And it also mentions that it's processing here, so this is also locked, so it does a reduction, or in that case upsampling and normalization. So let's give that now a listen. Yeah, sounds pretty identical, but now it's also, for example, working in Sphere, because Sphere just creates heavily distorted stuff. If we go into with a 12-bit and 15 kilohertz, I noticed, and this should now also work in a Sphere as well. On to the next one. After all the 50 series, Roland created the S-700 series, which also contains a lot of models. So there was the S-750, S-770, 760, but also the very weird DJ-70 in its versions 1 and 2, and the playback-only device, the SP-700, and they all use the same format. All the samples are in 16-bit, and it supports different frequency resolutions. Also the old ones, 50 and 30 kilohertz from the 50 series, are supported as well. That format has now the option to either come on diskettes or come on HD drives or CD-ROM files. Both of them are supported, and I even supported diskette files which span multiple diskettes. So for example, here I have 4 files of the factory library, and these two create one file basically, and these two as well, and this is a separate single disk. And if we choose now that folder as the source in ConvertWithMoss and select the S7XX series now, we can do, maybe let's do analyze first, and you see that what's happening is it detects the first disk with all that stuff, and it looks for the continuation disk because it spans now the L1, the 1 and the 2, and it could found its second part it needs and then could do the analysis correctly. And the second one is rejected because this is a continuation disk, and you will get this error. So let's do the conversion. And this worked fine. Oh, I also had still that enabled. Maybe we could turn that off again, because these are already 16-bit samples in a high resolution, so it's not necessary to do that. But now I create a lot of crap. Let's get rid of that first. And now let's do again the proper conversion again into that format. And let's see what we could get out of that. So, for example, some bells or something it seems to be. Let's again load that in Bitwig. Beautiful. What else did come of that? What do we have? Steel drums, why not? Oh, there were some funny drums, I think. Rock. No, that's a Rhodes. There are rock drums. They are cool. Yeah, very, very nice. Maybe we could here increase the release because Bitwig does not read envelopes or anything. And I think there's also a cool bass in there. Yeah, it's so surprising how those little old samples really sound pretty good. So absolutely worth having a look and a listen, and still can be used today. Also, last but not least, let's not forget to mention, you know, there is this generic ISO image detector. Where is it? ISO image detector. This does now also detect these new Roland images. It also detects the ensonic formats I supported in the last version. I forgot to add them to this detection. So everything that comes on a diskette or ISO file or something is now detected when you simply select that item. For example, if you're unsure what's actually on such a disk, you can now find out by using that option as the source. Yeah, so much for that in version 18. It's huge with lots of stuff. I hope you like it, dig it, and until next time, make some funky music.